So my name is Ella Grace. I was born in Zimbabwe and I live in UK. So today I just want to cover the story of about losing a parent to suicide. So I was 8 years old when the phone rang. I remember that day vividly. We had just finished eating supper. We were sitting and the phone rang. No one stood up. It was like an omen. Everyone just went quiet. You could hear a pin drop, but no one knew why. Then one of my brothers got the courage to stand up and go to the phone, and we received the news that my father had died. So my father was a headmaster, principal, at a school far away from home. So he used to go on Mondays and come back maybe Fridays. Sometimes he wouldn't come back, but that was sort of the arrangement, I could say. So he he sort of lived at the school, to be fair, right? So he would just come home for the weekends. And they reported that he had killed himself. It's a wound that never truly heals because you always wonder what I was young myself, I was 8. So I always left wondering what actually happened. How did he get to that extent where he felt so much despair that he thought it was okay for him to take his own life? But anyway, so he had committed suicide, and we had to arrange. Well, they had to arrange the funeral and everything, but because I was young, they didn't tell me the details of much of what had happened. All I knew is that my father had died. So he was buried and all that stuff. But I also remember my grandmother at the funeral, well, his mother, my father's mother. She was not a nice woman. And she was a weird woman, really. I don't know how else to say it. She was walking around. I remember that. Even though I was young, that I remember. She was walking around with this cup of tea, and she would say, well, he died, so what are you going to do about it? Which was weird because, like, it's your son who just died. So what are you trying to say, you know? And she was sort of ecstatic about it, which was confusing to everyone because everyone was just looking at each other like, what's wrong with this woman? But that's kind of where I come from, where the families are weird. So my grandmother was saying that, and then my uncle wanted everything. So like in African cultures, if you don't make a will back then, I don't know if things have changed, the relatives of the person who died could take everything from your children. So if you're in Africa, you have to be careful. You have to make a will. Actually, everywhere, to be fair, you have to make a will because sometimes there are loopholes in these things. So likely my father had made a will. So my uncle, who became very enraged after the funeral that he did not get anything, because he wanted everything, he wanted the house and the clothes, everything. He wanted everything, which is a strange thing because you just lost your brother. But you get to realize that people think about these things differently. So after the funeral, like I'm saying, my grandmother, my uncle, everyone was angry about the will. And likely, like I'm saying, my father left everything for his wife and us, his children. So we were able then to manage to continue with school. Because if he hadn't, I don't think we would have been able to go back to school. That's the honest truth. They would have taken everything. So we managed to go back to school and did the best that we could. But there is a stigma of having a parent that died to suicide that stays with you. Because I always have questions like, what was he like? Was he depressed before this happened? Why didn't anyone do anything? But then you also remember that in countries like in Zimbabwe, there is no mental health. I mean, like there is mental health, but it's not as well defined. There is no pills for this, pills for that, and there's no help as much as can be. So most people are just dealing with their mental health in the best way that they think they can, which doesn't give them room to get better. There's no counseling, there's no therapy, there's no this and that. So that's what happened then. But then I just found out this year. So I started asking, because I'm saying, there's always questions you want to understand. So I was talking to my sister and I said, so what really happened? What was going on there? And my sister tells me, oh, before he died, he was talking about how he was being followed by people. He was being paranoid. Okay, so because they told me he was schizophrenic, that was the idea, that was the belief. I was okay, fine, fair enough. She's like, oh, but then the way he had died, he'd been stabbed. I'm like, I've watched a few true crime documentaries. I've never seen a person who commits suicide by stabbing themselves to death. I haven't seen that one before. Then she goes into all these gory details. That made me realize that actually might actually have been murdered, because this man had told people, I'm being followed, but no one asked him. When you come from low effort families where people are just taking everything at face value, they didn't ask him, what do you mean you're being followed? By who? So he then died in that situation. Oh, yeah. So I said, so when you tell me that he committed suicide, oh, no, but then he was stabbed. How do you... so to me, I actually had to cry again. I had to mourn again, to fall into another despair. I felt like I lost my father again because I felt gaslighted. They've been lying to me all my life until I found out this year that he actually didn't kill himself. But then you are left with questions. So what do I do now? Do I go to the police? Do I start looking into it myself? Then you realize, come from Zimbabwe, the police there, I don't have trust in them myself. So what do I do now? That's my question. Do I actually just leave it be? Or do I actually go back and say, what happened? But who do you ask? Because the people who were adults at that time took it at face value. They took this man and buried him and did not ask any questions to say what actually happened. They took the word that I don't even know who told them that he committed suicide. But they took that at face value and buried him. So I'm confused and a little bit angry at the same time. And I feel gaslighted because how do you find someone dead and you say they killed themselves when you were not there? How do you actually join that together? How do you make it make sense? So that is my story. And right now I'm at the point where I am angry with my family, with all the adults that were there. Because who does that, right? How do you okay that and say it's okay as it is? Let's bury him. But at the same time, I want justice to be done for what happened many years ago. This is decades ago now. But I don't know where to start. Because like I'm saying, the police in Zimbabwe, well, I don't know. I don't have trust in them. Doesn't mean that they won't do a good job. But this happened in the 90s, right? Like a long time ago. I don't even know where to start. But it broke my heart. It really did. Actually, up to now, I'm still angry. It broke my heart. Like, why do people do that? When has that ever happened, that a person stabs themselves to death? I've never heard of it before. But that was the story that I was told ever since I was a young child. So I actually grew up with a father wound, believing that my father didn't love me enough to stay around. And then only to realize that actually he did love me. It was not up to him. He didn't do this. Someone else did it to him. It just leaves this gray area that I don't know how to navigate. So that's where I am at the moment. And I I really don't know what direction to take. I can only hope for the best, that one day I'll be able to have answers, but I'm not holding on to hope. That's the honest truth. So that's my story. That's what happened to my side of losing a parent suicide. But it does happen for some people. It might be the actual truth that they did lose their parents to suicide. All I can just tell you, for the years that I thought I've lost my father to suicide, is don't take it personally. Because most of the time people get desperate. Because I also go to work then in healthcare. I work for the NHS, and you get to meet people who are actually depressed, and people who do have the disease of schizophrenia that I was being told my father had. And you get to realize that someone is actually very sick, and whatever they're doing, it's actually not out of spite, it's not out of revenge, or it's not out of not loving anyone. They're struggling. And if you lose anyone to suicide, you're going to have to find a way to forgive them, and also realize that some of these mental illnesses are, oh my God, they take a toll on a person. So they are just brutal. And hopefully you can find peace one day. It doesn't come easy. I'll never lie that it will be easy to say, oh yeah, this happened, I'm over it. No, it takes time. But one day, hopefully you can say, this happened, let's move on, and you pray that they find peace, because it is hard. It is very hard. It is heartbreaking. So that is my story, and it's hard losing anyone to suicide. Hopefully, we get better mental health everywhere, because people are struggling. And the ones that struggle at home sometimes I actually think they are worse than the ones that are in hospital. Because at least in the hospital, there's staff there, there are people who are start looking after them. But sometimes people are breaking apart at home. So we just have to make sure you check on your families and friends. Just make sure everyone is okay. Like when you ask people, are you okay? Make sure you mean it. Because sometimes we ask at surface level, like, oh, are you okay? And you just want someone to say, yeah, I'm fine, as you pass by. But sometimes just have a cup of tea, sit down with someone, ask them, are you really okay? Catch up with people once in a while, because you don't know what's happening in their lives. And sometimes people are embarrassed with what's happening, even though life is complex, right? And they don't want to be judged. They don't want to feel like they've failed. But if you could just lend an ear, sometimes just being there, just being present, sometimes it's more than enough. So just make sure we take care of each other, love each other, and just be kind, even on the road, Sometimes having a bad day and someone just smiles at you and say, hi, like you just feel, okay, maybe it's not too bad. So be kind to everyone, because you don't know what they're going through. And it just makes, they pay it forward, right? So everyone is a little bit better for it. So it's not an easy topic to talk about, suicide. It's hard, and you always think, is it something? There were times where I actually thought it's something that can be passed down in generations, which of course it's not. But I did not understand it. I had to get counseling as well. There was a time I actually struggled a lot. So I had to go for counseling because I wanted to understand. But now, like I'm saying, I just found out this year, like, no, that's not actually the whole story. So now I actually have to find the answers again, maybe get more counseling. So it's always like a roller coaster. There's always new emotions being formed, and you're always trying to heal, but it's like this wound that never truly heals. So I just wish everyone was going through losing a loved one to suicide. I just wish you well, and hopefully you can find peace with everything eventually.